In this video, we are going to complete our introduction on the neo-metaphysics. In particular, here we are going to discuss the reinterpretation of this old picture of mine painted in 1992 by approaching it by this new point of view. Just to remind you, our target is to shoot the photo to an idea. In the first part of this video, we are going to see the painting definition, all the choices that brought us to this scene representation, while in the second part we are going to see how, by using the fundamentals that we have discussed in our course, we are going to actually paint it. Since the scene subjects are pretty much defined by the first painting, here we are going to discuss mostly the photographic effects that we are going to represent. If we compare this work with the first example that we have seen, we can notice that both pictures have a blurry background, but for different photographic reasons. In the first, the idea behind was to play with the exposure to blurry the background, so by the theoretical point of view, we had to set our hypothetical camera with a wide aperture and a short exposure time. In this situation, the camera sets on focus all the close subjects and gradually blur the rest based on the distance. Honestly, I'm not even sure that a real camera in front of this scene can actually get this type of outcome. A photographer has to deal with real light and the camera limits. But this is the beauty of what we do, We can actually decide to paint photographic effects even if in that specific situation a camera couldn't actually shoot them. In this new scene, we get our photographic effects by playing with the focal length, which is an optical feature of the lens. Based on the type that we set on our camera, one part of the scene gets extremely on focus, while everything else that comes before and after gets somehow blurred. In our case, we have set the focus on the area where the pawn is and let the lens do the rest. We can see that the part of the chessboard closer to our point of view is quite blurry, and that gradually gets on focus on the pawn and the white king. And this happens also for the black king, the rook, and the bishop, that are quite blurry. And since the background is very far, in our picture it will be really blurry. Part of the painting definition is to set the right point of view for our scene. The original presentation is axonometric, with the point of view coming 30-40 degrees from the top. In our representation, in order to make it look as realistic as possible, we have to turn the axonometry into a perspective. We are also going to choose a lower point of view in order to see the scene more frontally. The last thing we have to notice is the light color, which is quite different from the original. In fact, I decided to put this composition in a sunset light, and this for two reasons. The first, if you remember when we have talked about lights and shadows, we have discussed that the right tone of light in our scene can generate in the viewer the right mood to see the painting. And since this is already quite apocalyptic scene, I thought that a nice warm light could take some of the drama off. The second is more practical. In fact, by positioning the sun right behind the pawn and blurring it, I can recreate the aura that we can see surrounding it in the original scene. When it comes to the painting, the first thing I have to say is that I couldn't paint this picture only using my imagination. So, playing with my computer, I first created and rendered the scene exactly like I want it, so that now I can use it as reference for my work. To start the actual painting, as we have seen many times in our course, the first step is to draw a sketch on the support. In this case, a 120 by 60 centimeter canvas. as I very often do, and also in this case, I use a technique that we have discussed at the end of the video when we have talked about sketches. And using a felt tip pen, I set the reference I need to start working. To save some time, I'm not going to start discussing the painting from the beginning, but at this point in the painting so that we can start to see what happened on the canvas. As we have seen when we have talked about representative painting, our job is to focus on a small detail of the subject, making a strategy on how to represent it using the fundamentals and then paint it on the support. And then check how that piece fits the scene that we are representing. And piece by piece fill the whole canvas. For example, I'm going to focus my attention on this area of the chessboard. My strategy is to start painting the whole area uniformly in a dark brown. That's the most similar color I have on my palette. I'm going to join it with the top light brown area, exactly like we have done when we have seen how to paint uniform areas. To make it a bit lighter, I'm going to blend it with some light brown. Now, to keep working on the details, I'm going to move my attention on this other area of the chessboard, where the idea is to make this corner darker and smoothly get lighter on the opposite one. So, I'm going to start with some dark brown here and some middle dark brown here. Like we did before, slowly I'm going to fill the whole area and connect it with the two light areas on the left and on the top. At this point, it's time to start seeing how all the pieces that we have painted so far look together, if they fit our scene well, or if we had to correct something. For example, I'm going to fix the transition between the middle dark brown and the dark brown here. I'm going to do the same thing here between the white and the light brown. I'm going to continue smoothing this area here. And I'm going to blend some white here to light up this corner. I think this is too much, so as we did before, I'm going to use an air stick to remove the paint in excess, and I'm going to blend the rest. For example, I'm going to correct this line here that joins the dark and the light brown to pull it up a little bit. Something I would like you to notice is that since this is the area of the chessboard where the camera focus is set, the border between the different squares of the chessboard are pretty sharp. While, for example, the black king is in an area where things start to be a little bit blurry. So, to complete the piece, I'm going to bring some dark brown and some bistro on the canvas, and using a middle large rounded brush, I'm going to fade all the areas into each other with a quite short transition. In this way, the king looks a little bit blurry. Let's make a step forward now, and let's go to see what happened to the square of the chessboard in this area, where according with our target here, things become more blurry. So with a square brush, I'm going to fill the support, and using a large rounded one, I'm going to fade the connection between the different colors, this time increasing a little bit the transition length. Let's go to see what happened on the background. Here the things are really blurry, so the whole background becomes a mix of colors blending and fading into each other with a quite long transition. In this case, I'm going to use the largest rounded brush that I have. Please notice that to work on the transition, no matter if short or long, I'm using a rounded brush, but not the pointed one. If you remember when we have talked about brushes, the rounded is the one where we cut the tip off. As always, when we work on fading colors, remember to keep your brush as clean as possible. Let's go to see now what happened to the pawn and the white king. Unlike the black king, the rook and the bishop, that in our photo are quite blurry, these pieces are in the focus area. This means that, of course, we have to paint them on focus. Let's start, for example, from the pawn. In both representations, the pawn should be made in a neutral color. While in the original representation it was blue, here we are going to paint it in a transparent material. By now, we should know how to paint transparent objects because we have seen many. First by the theoretical point of view and then practically in the last two examples. So we are not going to spend much time discussing it. But I want to point out that since the pawn is on focus, its border is quite sharp, and that the internal carried image is on focus too, even if the background isn't, and that's because the material works like a lens. Since the pawn is surrounded by a white aura, I'm going to start working the outside first, and then I'm going to paint the piece inside. Notice that I first draw the old sharp border and then I started painting inside. The border is going to give me some reference while I paint it. Also, notice that in my model, the head of the pawn was almost cylindrical with round corners, while here I'm going to paint it spherical. And that's because at the end, our final representation is on the canvas. And although it looked good cylindrical while I was building the scene on my computer, now I decided that I prefer it spherical. And piece by piece, I'm going to complete the distorted projected scene that we can see inside the pawn. Another consideration I want to make is on the white king, comparing it with the black one. Here, since everything is on focus, this reflection that we can see on the left and inside are pretty sharp, while on the black king, even if with a short transition, we faded them. Also here, we should be able to see clearly the wood grains, so we have to paint them. While on the black king, the wood grains were hidden by the blur. Before we bring this video to an end, I would like to talk about the chessboard. As we have seen many times already, transparent and reflective objects help the viewers to perceive our works as more realistic. So all these reflections of the sun here and of the pieces here help us to create the effect of a semi-polished wooden base. And with this last consideration, we have seen everything we need to complete the rest of this work. At this point, we have concluded our course on the fundamentals of the representative oil painting and the introduction on the neo-metaphysics. So let's sum up what we have learned. As first, we have seen some very basic knowledge of physics and chemistry that we have used during the whole course. We have seen what tools and materials we need in this activity, and we have learned how to choose them. We have seen by the theoretical and practical point of view the fundamentals of the oil painting technique. To start without the pressure of the result, we have practiced them using the abstract. And then we have seen all the things we need to start working on our first representative painting. Finally, in this last chapter, we have seen a different way to paint representative. In the next two videos, we are going to set the basis to auto-evaluate our works. If you enjoyed this video, we will really appreciate if you could click on like and subscribe to our channel. It will also help us very much if you could leave a comment. Thank you for watching this video and see you in the next one.